Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 elections continues with an interview with State Representative Joe Sanfelippo. He's a Republican from New Berlin. He's running, seeking re-election in the 15th Assembly District. Joe, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Steve, thanks for having me.
And a programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. You're seeking only your second term.
Yes.
But you got quite a bit done for a freshman the first term, and I want to, well, my first question is, you, on your website, you talk about how you restructured much of Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. So my first question is, any other changes you'd like to make and where you used to serve in the county courthouse with the county's Board of Supervisors for next session, Joe?
I think that there's a couple things we could take a look at. Dan Diliberti, the outgoing treasurer, has advocated strongly for eliminating that position from an elected position to appointed because of the way the role has changed in the county. I think that's something that makes sense and warrants us to take a look at. So, I may be looking at something along those lines. As far as the county board itself, I think we need time for them to kind of settle in, their new role, and I use the word new cautiously because it really is what they should have been doing all along. Based on the way other county boards act around the state. So time will tell if things need to be tweaked or adjusted in regards to the board, but overall I think that I'm just very happy that the voters had the opportunity to speak in the referendum. That's something that I had worked for even when I was on the board. And the referendum passed by over 70%, and so I think the voters are, have a final say on their level of representation.
What do you think are your top priorities if you're reelected for the next session, Joe?
I think I want to continue working on education. Towards the end of this session, I did a couple of education issues. I'm going to focus on education and crime. I think those are two related problems that we have in the state. We have to have a good education for our kids so that they can go out and earn a decent living, and I think that will help us with the crime battle. And those are two areas that I'll focus on moving forward.
Let's follow up on schools. What do you think MPS needs to do a better job, sir?
I think that, you have to have the teachers be able to be a little bit more in charge of their classrooms and be able to be effective teachers. I think that MPS, there's several problems there, but one of the problems is that the teachers aren't allowed to teach and do their jobs. I think MPS is expecting teachers to not only be a teacher, but to kind of step in and be a parent. And, that's not fair to the teachers because they have enough of a challenge to get the kids educated. Part of the problem we have with our education system is that the parents aren't engaged. There's no support there at home for the teachers, and so that makes the teacher's job a little bit more difficult. I think that we have to focus on just the basics, the test scores, and make sure that we're graduating every kid with the capabilities to be able to go on and get a good job and earn a living.
If you want to strengthen the role of the teacher, is that something that has to be talked about and with the union and the school board, or is that something you can pass a law to help?
Well, I think that everybody should be at the table helping. Contributing to what the solution is. I mean, I certainly don't have all the answers. I've spent a lot of time this summer talking to a lot of different individuals and groups trying to gather information as much as I can on where specific problems need to be addressed and where we can kind of let things go as they are. So I have some definite ideas that I'm going to vet out over the next coming months here. But it really is an overall approach, and you have to just start from the top and make some changes at the top and work all the way down.
Let's stay on schools for two more questions. What do you think should be the future of the voucher and choice program in the next budget, sir?
I think that we need a well-rounded school system in the state that is going to provide choice, charter, and public schools. All three of those groups play a very important part in educating our children. And for me, the bottom line is any school that is properly and successfully educating children has my 100% support. So everybody has to kind of take a step back, and rather than fighting each other, we need to realize that it isn't one or the other, it's a mix of all three that are really going to provide the education.
The speaker said he'd like to remove that 1,000 cap on outstate total for choice. Is that something you could support, sir?
Yes, I would support that. I think that the parents should have every opportunity to give their child a decent education and a good education. And in some areas in the central city of Milwaukee, for example, children are held back strictly because of their zip code as far as where they can attend schools, and in the outer areas. And so I think that it's something that we need to take a look at.
Governor Walker's call to repeal, withdraw from Common Core standards. Do you support the governor's?
I do. I think that we're better off when it comes to education. We're better off making decisions at the local level. I don't believe that a one-size-fits-all approach dictated from the federal government is what's best. But I would go a step farther. I think we need to take a look at our entire education system that we have here in the state of Wisconsin. Between the taxpayers that pay the bill and the kids that receive the education, we have 7 different layers of bureaucracy here. I think we need to take a look at that. We're spending tens of millions of dollars in administrative costs and overlap that we should cut and send that money directly into the classroom where it's going to aid the child the best.
Let's go back to your crime priority. Is there any one new bill or law that you're going to push to help with the crime problem in the city of Milwaukee on the eve of that tragic death of Sierra Guyton?
Yes, I think that, again, it's not a silver bullet that's going to fix all the problems there. There's several different things that need to be looked at, from probation and parole to sentencing and holding people accountable. But in the end, I think that the problem in Milwaukee boils down to one thing, and there is not enough police officers there.
Okay. Let's talk about transportation funding. Now, the Zoo Freeway, $1.7 billion, the Hone Bridge, there's a lot of needs in Milwaukee, but Taxpayers Alliance said if we keep our transportation spending at 2013 levels for 10 years, we have a $2 billion deficit. Do you think we have a deficit? And if so, how should we fix it?
Yeah, I think there is a deficit from a lot of the reports and studies that I've seen. We all know transportation is crucial to our economy and our state, so we have to keep our infrastructure up. There's been some recommendations and suggestions as to fee increases or tolls or other things like that. I think that along with looking at other sources of revenue, we have to take a look at how we spend our money. I mean, we have prevailing wage laws that date back 80 years to the Depression era that are inflating the costs of our projects. We are putting in, bike lanes and sidewalks in areas where they really may not be warranted, and again, adding extreme amount of cost to jobs, projects where they may not be warranted. So there's a lot of savings that can be achieved, and we need to look at that first before we start asking the taxpayers for more money.
Would you consider, though, raising the gas tax or the $75 car the license plate renewal fees?
I think that those are issues going forward. If you take a look, a younger generation seems to be relying less on automobiles and driving miles, and so I think that we have to just kind of rethink the whole approach and maybe look for alternative ways of funding as opposed to just the gas tax or the registration fee, because while that may be a short-term fix, in the long term that may not provide the revenue that we're going to need to keep our roads in good condition.
Let me ask you a healthcare question. As you know, Joe, 1 in 5 Wisconsin residents gets their health care from our Medicaid program. The American Hospital Association says Wisconsin has the second lowest reimbursement rates. Do you think it's time to raise those, or have you not studied that issue?
I think we need to take a look at it. I believe we reimburse at about a 65% rate right now in the state of Wisconsin. We do other things, though. We have a program, and we added more money to it in this budget where it actually gives additional payments to hospitals who have a high level of Medicaid patients. I think that's fair. I think we need to target the money to where it's really being spent. With the governor's program this year, we now, for the first time ever in state history, have every person below poverty level has health insurance. That's never happened before. We also have the exchanges that are coming in that will be providing more coverage. So all of those things are going to join together to dictate to us in the future where we need to go. It's an issue that has to be addressed, because what it really does is it just shifts the costs then onto other patients and other employers who are paying health care.
I'm going to ask this question to candidates from candidates for the Assembly and Senate who come from Southeast Wisconsin. You're well aware of the dialogue over a new Milwaukee Bucks arena. Should state government contribute any part of that $400 to $500 million cost, Joe?
I don't think state government should pay any direct costs. I think there's things that we could do to promote an environment to make it very friendly for outside investors to step in and put some money forth. You know, we have many great programs and spend a lot of money enticing employers to come to our state and to stay in our state. I think we need to take a look at the Bucks organization as an employer. It's very good for the Milwaukee area. It brings a lot of money, a lot of commerce, a lot of activity to Milwaukee. It shines a spotlight on our state, but at the same time, I have a big problem with public money financing private businesses like that, and I would have a real concern with that. So there are ways we can do it, but not public tax dollars.
The debate on the different issues, sorry to jump around so much, but there will be a bill introduced for medical marijuana next session. How do you feel about that bill? And it's likely to be accompanied by a bill for recreational use of marijuana, sir.
I don't support either. I think that there's many reports that you take a look at that says, you know, marijuana use causes everything from, you know, brain damage to heart conditions to, you know, neuropsychotic issues in children. And so, in fact, there's a recent study released in Colorado that just since they legalized marijuana, how that's affected the public health and safety there, and it's not good. And so I just think that you know, it would not be good for society. It's not a proper thing to do. Will not have my support.
One of the first bills I think you voted for was the bill that allowed Gogebic Taconite to apply for that open pit iron mine.
Yes. In
Ashland and Iron counties. Well, the news over the weekend was that they contributed $700,000 to Republicans who were fighting to keep their jobs, starting with the governor. Best of your knowledge, did any of you Assembly Republicans, were you aware of that gift at the time?
No, but I really don't think it matters. I mean, you can take a look at the organizations who are very anti-mine, and I'm sure that and they've donated equal amounts of money, if not more, to, you know, people on the other side of the issue. I think that in the end, what you have to do is take a look at the legislation and see if it's good for our state, good for the area, and I think that was a good bill.
Okay, there's no need to change that, and you didn't know anything about that $700,000.
No, you know, we sat through 12 hours of public testimony. In fact, it was one of the very first meetings I had, and listened to both sides of the argument. And you know, it was very disconcerting to hear, you know, one of the local Indian tribes come up and lambast us as you know, accusing us of creating genocide, and then turn around and find out that they're one of the biggest water polluters that the state has, and they've been violating EPA rules for many, many years. It's just, you know, there's extremes on both sides of the issue. You have to peel away those extreme positions and just take a look at the core. And what we did is we provided a permitting process that will expedite it, and still it has to go through all the regular approvals between the federal government and the DNR. And in the end, if the DNR sees that everything can happen while protecting the environment and still creating jobs, it will go forward.
On your website, you claim credit for voting for the 3 tax cuts that passed in the last 18-20 months. Here's my question. Do you think there's any chance that those tax cuts will trigger a deficit in the next biennium? And if there is a deficit, how should it be fixed?
I don't think the tax cuts will create a deficit, because we've seen time and again that whenever we do a tax cut, it turns around and actually increases revenue. So we're going to see in fact, that's why we were able to do 3 tax cuts in one session, because revenue kept increasing every time it was happen. I'm not a fan of deficits. If for some reason a genuine deficit were to appear, it would have to be addressed through spending cuts. But you know, you have the deficits that are created on paper because the revenue projections don't increase, and as the tax cuts come in, they'll actually decrease. But overall, every time we cut taxes, we actually create more revenue for the state.
And it was an issue in the Attorney General's office. There's always a bill in this, or at least discussion in the Capitol. First offense drunken driving, should it be a crime?
Yes. I think that you know, people can make mistakes, and but if you have a blood alcohol level that's, you know, twice what the legal limit is, that goes beyond a mistake. So I think we need to crack down on our drunken driving laws. We certainly need to take a look at the repeat offenders and toughen those up. Along with that, though, we can pass all the laws that we want in the legislature, but if the judges are not going to sentence them, and if the district attorneys are going to cut plea deals, it's not going to do us any good. So I think we need to look just beyond the laws that we're passing as a legislature and start putting a little more scrutiny at the local level on the DAs and judges to make sure they're doing their part to upholding the law.
And then the final question is, do you want to highlight any differences with your opponent on November 4? This is a former fellow supervisor, isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay. Any differences you want to highlight?
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of differences, and as I'm going around the district, it's easy for me to show off my record of sticking up for the taxpayers to my opponent's record of sticking it to the taxpayers. For 14 years, he's been a Milwaukee County Board Supervisor, and during that time, he's proposed over $130 million in spending increases. I voted for 3 tax cuts that had directly put more money into middle-class families' pocketbooks. I strongly supported the reform of the Milwaukee County Board and having a referendum so that the voters would have their ability to say on the level of representation. He strongly opposed it. He sat on his hands for 14 years while Milwaukee had an absolutely horrendously failing mental health system. Even as patients were dying from incompetent care, he did nothing. I took that on, and we passed a bipartisan bill that passed the legislature 122-1 to fix that problem. He is still today advocating or complaining against that bill.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Representative Joe Sanfelippo is a Republican. He's from New Berlin. He's seeking re-election in the 15th Assembly District. Joe, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.